I can't be very, it's like psychotherapy, right? If somebody came into my office for therapy, but they didn't tell me anything and I just talked to them, it's not going to be very psychotherapeutic, right? So it's the same thing. Each of you are in a specific, individual, unique life experience that has a specific, individual, unique conditioning behind it. Each of you has been scared different ways. They call it trauma. Each of you has been scared different ways about life. And the reason that you're so vulnerable to be scared about life is because the only program you have to use to live your life is called survival. And that's why you're scared, right? Because once you're in this mindset of survival, your life is about looking out for threats, isn't it? Once you're in a mindset of survival, it doesn't occur to you that you're necessarily in a mindset of survival because everybody else is too. So you're not unique. Everybody's anxious. Everybody's paranoid. You know, everybody is frustrated. Everybody's intolerant. Everybody is suffering. You know, so you're not unique. You're not different in regard to any of that. But the reason that's the case is because there hasn't been a recognition of the fact that the nervous system and the brain that's running the nervous system are running a program that has you experience yourself as something that you're not, being separate from everything else that exists. And so instead of the teaching that they have in the Advaita Vedanta, existence, consciousness, bliss, you know, Sat Chit Ananda, instead of that, it's sat and then identify with something that you're not, and then that's what you identified yourself as that you're not is conscious. You see the problem? The natural way things are is Sat Chit Ananda. You exist, you are consciousness, and you are happy. Simple, very simple. But the way it is for most people, you exist, then you take on an identity to be something that you're not, and you're afraid, and you're struggling, and you're coping, and you're at odds with reality. And that identity you've taken on, you consider that to be conscious. So you're using the consciousness, the mind is running the show, and you're using the consciousness as an attribute that you have, not what you are. So the mind's running the show, you're using the consciousness as a tool you're using instead of what you are. Consciousness. So you're using it to use the material of the mind, which has defined reality for you, and the identity that you've taken on, which was given to you by the poor suckers that were here first. And then you're trying to live that life to get to the happiness, to get to the bliss, but you can't get there because where you are doesn't exist. You can't get from nowhere to somewhere. So that's the situation we find ourselves in, is that there is existence, and the identity has, the conditioning and the identity has occurred, and that's blocked the rest of the natural state. It's blocked it. And so in order to get to the rest of it, we have to practice meditation, slow down, calm down, relax the physical body, and pay attention so that we can see what's happening instead of only see what's in the mind. If you got the survival program running, then you have the glasses on that you can't see what's happening, you can only see threats. You can only see what the mind is seeing. And the mind is an operation that's designed to have you be careful, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
It's an operation that's designed to have you seek safety, to be careful, to try and get some stability, something you can depend on, something that is consistent. This is why we have marriage. This is why we have mortgages. Something that will stay for 30 years, you know, something that will last. And even though we try and use everything that is available to us to find some kind of stable reality, some kind of consistent existence, it doesn't work. It can't possibly work because, and this is why I say, it can't possibly work because impermanence is a law, just like gravity is. And you're trying to defy the law of impermanence, to make something stay the way it is. And the only way you can keep believing that you can make something stay the way it is to ignore the way it's actually happening, which is constantly changing. So that if you practice paying attention, you might notice it. You might notice that there is no possibility for stability in the ordinary state of affairs because everything is constantly changing, including your mind, including your thoughts, including your body, including the world. Everything is in flux. This is the first thing that has to be recognized in order for you to be able to have the kind of commitment and motivation necessary to do these practices. You've got to realize you cannot succeed. You will never be happy. You will suffer the rest of your life. You cannot succeed. This situation is a failure. It cannot work. Right? So if you get that, if you're clear that that's the case, and then in addition to that, you find out that there is a teaching and there is a practice that does work, that actually does work. Why? Because it's not dependent on the unstable, impermanent reality. It's not dependent on that. It's dependent on the recognition that the solution to the problem, and this is interesting, it depends on the recognition that the solution to the problem, where you think the solution to the problem would be to find something that is constant, something that doesn't change. And that's one of the reasons that we talk about awareness, right? Because the conceptual understanding of what awareness is that it's something that's constant and it never changes. The only problem with that is that the awareness and that which you're aware of are the same thing. Now what? If awareness is the thing that's stable, that's constant and doesn't change, and therefore you want to experience that, so you can experience some peace, some consistency, and so you take that on as a goal. Oh, I want to be the awareness, and that'll solve my problem. No, it won't. No, because the teaching is that the awareness is separated from that which is constantly changing in order to recognize it. That's part of the process, in order to recognize it, right? Having recognized it, the next step is to realize what you've recognized is not just the awareness, it is the awareness and the content of awareness, which are the same thing, which means everything is still constantly changing. You haven't solved anything. So then what's the solution? And by the way, I have been saying the solution over and over again. And so if I say, what's the solution? And you're like lost, where have you been? No, that's not the solution. There is a conceptual solution to it. There is, if one of the conceptual understandings of the teaching is that everything is constantly changing, that impermanence is a fact, it's a law. And so then we decide, oh, well, we've recognized that awareness doesn't change. It stays the same. Your awareness is the same now as it was when you were 5 years old. Oh, so if I can purely be that, I'll be out of trouble, right? But the problem is, once you realize that, the first thing after that you realize is, wait a minute, the awareness and what I'm aware of are the same thing. And what I'm aware of is constantly changing. So I haven't succeeded. So now what? There is a solution.
Give up. Acceptance. Yeah. No, you get it. You give up. No.
This is the Heart Sutra, which I have repeatedly talked about here, right? It's right there. It's right there. It says it very clearly right there. Does anybody remember what the Heart Sutra says in the very beginning? What is transcendental wisdom?
That which is seeking is what you're looking for.
No, that's smart rat talk. What's transcendental wisdom? It says it in the beginning of the Heart Sutra.
We say it all the time.
Oh, I can't.
Where's Bob?
Consciousness is all there is.
No.
What's real?
We are awareness.
What's real never
It says in the very beginning of the Heart Sutra, upon recognizing that there is no self. So you see, the solution to the problem that I was referring to earlier, right, is that there isn't a problem because there's nobody to have one. That's the solution to the problem.
But you're saying that awareness is always, it's always changing, but it's constant at the same time. So whether or not there's a self involved, it's still the situation.
For who?
It's self that doesn't identify with.
Isn't there duality
So,
and non-duality?
What were you saying?
Only if you identify with it.
Yeah, only if you keep operating in life as if you are real.
So in awareness, conditioning shows up.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't identify with that conditioning and you see it for what it is,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you
But you see, you can't.
identify with that conditioning,
Yeah.
then you're in it.
Yeah, but you see, whether you identify or you don't identify depends on whether there's anybody to identify. That's the source of the real problem. Franz Klein, I saw, it just happened to be on my phone. Franz Klein was Francis Lucille's teacher. You know, the teachers, you know, Rupert Spira, Francis Lucille was his teacher. Franz Klein was a teacher of him. And Franz Klein said, when you're clear about the truth, you're clear that you don't exist.
So you're saying you identify with something that doesn't exist
Yeah,
when that happens.
yeah. You that's what your birth was, an identification with something that doesn't exist, wasn't it? Your birth wasn't when the baby took a first breath. That baby was still pure awareness. Baby didn't have language, didn't have an identity. It was just an organism, pure organism, right? Your birth happened when your thinking started and you were given a name. That's when you were born. And that birth is the birth of something that doesn't exist. But if you identify with that and you believe it does exist, you get to start to suffer the life of that which doesn't exist.
There's no other choice. Can't walk around with no name and no, you know what I mean? You have to be a person.
Okay, I'm not here to debate this.
Exist in the
You're
world.
arguing with the truth, by the way. You're arguing with the truth. See, that's the thing about this, is that one of the things the mind wants to do is turn this into a debate. Well, yes, but how about this and how about that, you know? Or you said this, doesn't that contradict what you're saying now? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's only one thing that is important to understand, that the truth is the truth. At the end of the Heart Sutra, that's exactly what it says. This is true. This is not false. This is real. This is true. And this is possible for you to experience because you are the experience of it. It's possible for you to experience the truth because you are the truth. You are the experience of it. And no matter what argument you come up with, what are you arguing for? More suffering? You know? There's only going to be more suffering if you don't allow yourself to at least get the conceptual understanding of how this works. At least the conceptual understanding of how this works. Everything is impermanent, nothing is stable, everything is constantly changing except the awareness. The only problem with that is the awareness and what's in the awareness is the same thing, therefore everything is constantly changing, you haven't solved anything. The only way out of that is to realize that the one who's trying to avoid suffering doesn't exist. The one that's trying to figure it out doesn't exist. The one that's trying to get from where you think you are, which is not where you are, the one that's trying to get from where you think you are to some other place that's not real, is not going to work.
Who is the Heart Sutra saying we are if we're not real?
Nobody.
But how can we be nobody?
That's where you have to take it from the concept to the experience. If you got a good smack in the head, you'd be nobody real quick.
No, I was somebody when I got smacked.
No, I'm talking about if you lost your memory, not if your father smacked you.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, when I got smacked, I knew who I was.
If you lost your memory, you would know what I'm talking about because you wouldn't know who you were. Well, how could you not know? If who you are is real, how could you not know who you are? How could you? If who you are is real, how could you not know who you are? You didn't know who you are when you were an infant. And the people that have full amnesia or dementia don't know who they are. So how real can it be, right? So what am I talking about? I'm talking about, instead of being afraid of dementia, cause it. Cause it.
Well, the human condition, the word knowing infers thinking, right? So
Which isn't true.
knowing anything is false.
No, that's not the case because you see, you said in the ordinary way that we understand everything, knowing implies thinking, right? But then you believed that premise and went to the next thing. But that premise isn't true. Awareness knows. Your awareness knows what's going on in this room right now without thinking about it. But you ignore that because you've been conditioned to believe in thinking. So you think I have to think in order to know. But what you're thinking is coming from your conditioning, and your conditioning is a misunderstanding about reality. That's not going to work.
Did you say our personality was part of our awareness?
Your personality and the awareness are the same thing.
Oh,
Your personality and everything are the same thing. Emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. All right? So you and the world, you and life are the same thing. There is nothing separate from this. That's why one of the koans in Zen is, what is this? What is this? It's a koan. And the answer is, this is this. It's like one of the famous Zen koans is one of the sound of one hand clapping. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Right? I heard that back in the 70s, right? And I got it right away. Because for some reason it occurred to me to be obvious, And what's your answer? What is the sound of one hand clapping?
The point of a koan is there was no answer.
Well, it's true. There is no specific answer, right? But there's an unlimited number of answers. That's why the person that is giving you the koan has to know that. That it's not a specific
What is
answer.
the
yeah,
answer?
what is the answer?
There is no sound, right?
Nothing, silence.
No. If you get this, it can be an awakening moment, right? The sound of what is the sound of one hand clapping, right? If I were to write that on a blackboard, what is the sound of one hand clapping, right? And then I put an equal sign after that, right? Sound of one. What is the sound of one hand clapping? And then over here I write the sound of one hand clapping is the sound of one hand clapping. You see, the mind thinks it's referring to something else. It's referring to itself. The sound of one hand clapping is not referring to what you think about it in terms of a hand clapping. No, it's referring to itself. The sound of one hand clapping, if I wrote that out, right, it's referring to that, the sound of one hand clapping, that sound of one hand clapping. That's why the answer to the koan, what is this, right, is this is this. It's pretty obvious, isn't it?
This isn't that.
What is that? That is that. So what are your questions?
Oh, jeez.
You got 2 minutes.
How do I make myself go away?
By realizing you were never here. That's how you make yourself go away, by realizing you were never here.
Is marriage a koan?
What did he say?
What's the sound of Brian when I pick off?
I had this couple come to me about 3 or 4 weeks ago for therapy. I don't like working with couples in therapy. It's too dicey, But I did it anyway, just to see if I could, succeed. And it really became an interesting process for me because I realized rather than help them get along, right? That's usually what you're doing. No, I just told them your relationship is a practice. Practice being kind to one another.
That's good advice.
Yeah, practice being kind to one another. Practice being thoughtful with each other, you know. Think of the other person. You know, we normally think if the other person would change, then our relationship would work, right? Look at it this way. Who would you have to be so that they changed? Not just say to them, you change, but who would you have to be that would have them be who you want them to be? Look at that, and then practice being that. Practice being that, and you may discover magic. You may discover magic. Relationship is a practice. Why? Because the way it's normally done is insane. Expecting other people to, you know, when you expect another human being to fit your pictures, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen. They will always be different, right? They will always be different. And as long as the way they're different doesn't mean they're a mass murderer, the relationship can work. You know, if they're not a mass murderer, if they're not strung out on heroin, right? If they're not, you know, if they're not that crazy, then most people are just neurotic. And they're both neurotic, so, you know,